I think 9 wins is like, all right, that's a good season. Depends who you beat, who you lose to. 8 wins, I think this year would be cataclysmic.
Welcome back to the ANF Podcast. We're really excited about this episode. It's probably going to be our favorite episode we've done so far. It's going to be a season preview. So we're going to run through the entire schedule, do a game-by-game breakdown of what we think is going to happen, and then end the episode with a final prediction. And I think what we kind of want to break out in this is, some key storylines that we anticipate going throughout the season, and then some games that we think might go either way.
Yeah, and I think this is always the most exciting time of the year, is to have, a season prediction and breakdown. But also, I think this year in particular, you have such a high turnover rate in the Big Ten West in terms of coaches. The transfer portal is, completely played out now in the Big Ten West. You're bringing in 4 new transfer QBs, actually 5, I believe, into the division. Obviously, those new coaches are going to have completely new schemes and new ideas how to run offense and defense in the Big Ten West, and also it being the last year of the Big Ten West division. I think that just leads to, the clock is ticking on Iowa's program. I think everyone in the program, inside and out, realize how important of a year this is, because you really have to capitalize on the schedule. And I've seen a lot of fans lately, breaking down like what would be a good season for Iowa. I think everyone states that 10 wins would be, the kind of point where everyone's like,
happy with the result,
satisfied with it.
Yeah.
I think 9 wins is like, all right, that's a good season. Depends who you beat, who you lose to. 8 wins, I think this year would be cataclysmic. I think you would, if you saw an offense struggle and you saw 8 wins with this schedule, with everything that's happening with, the future of the program and the future of the conference, there'd be a lot of concern if there was only 8 wins this year. So I think it really kind of like brings the importance of this season, and it's why it's so exciting of a time for Iowa, because it's go time. It's time to have a great year. You got the team, you got the schedule.
Well, how other teams are ramping up their coaching searches. Matt Rule and Lou Fickell entering the fold is significant, and I think another thing we can bring up is how this contrasts to last year's lead-in. After an abysmal offense in 2021. We had a lot of lip service about how we were going to have this outgrowth of a new team, but you didn't really have any evidence that was going to occur. You had we're throwing it deeper in practice. We're going to take more chances. We're going to allow for more run and catch. This year, with the additions of the transfer portal players, there are at least marketable differences that will be different. We'll have improved quarterback play. We'll have receiver talent out wide that should be at least someone like in the stretch of the field, and then you have also some pretty impactful defensive players too.
Yeah, I think it leads into the hype a lot to have tangible reasons why to feel more excited. I think the off season is generally every time the time for every program to get a little too hyped about their team.
Yeah,
Iowa has very good reason to be excited. I think when you watch Cade's 2021 highlights, you think about Eric All in the system. Caleb Brown's the best receiver we've had in a long time.
Yep.
You really have a huge question mark fill with Nick Jackson coming in. If you didn't have him transferring in, you'd be very concerned about the linebacker position. You get that fill spot. Most of the questions you generally have in the offseason about Iowa, and then you kind of think about it a little harder. You go, this might be an 8-4 team. It's going to have some weak points. Those almost all got answered by the transfer portal, which kind of leads more into the expectations for this year.
Well, I think this is the first season that Brian Ferentz has true pieces at every skill position.
Right.
Caleb Brown is going to offer a true talent where if he gets in the ball, he can make a play within the system. You have 2 tight ends who will likely be NFL players. You have a QB who will at least have a shot at the NFL. You have a developed O-line. This is the year where if it doesn't work out on the offensive end, granted, he already has that built into his contract, less than 24 points, and he's out the door. But we won't be able to blame personnel this year.
No.
Last year you walked in, you had, Keegan Johnson essentially quit on the team. Arlen Bruce was banged up in camp. You rolled out the worst wide receiver core in the country.
Yeah.
And you had a QB who couldn't complete a 5-yard out.
Yeah. Or move the chain with his legs.
And that Brian still had some excuses to, play out. This time around, you're going to have another stellar defense. If you can complement it with a top 75 offense with the schedule they have, a Big Ten West title is very much within reach. If you say jump to that 2015 range where it's, top 60, top 50 offense, that's where we could talk about winning a Big Ten championship.
Definitely. Well, shall we get into the actual schedule now? And we're going to go game by game and just give, win or loss prediction. Feel free to comment in the YouTube section what your prediction is as well. But we're going to skip Utah State, Western Michigan, and Rutgers. I don't think we need to discuss those games. Those non-conference games at home, you anticipate to win, 21-3, 24-10. Iowa controls the game, running the ball, playing good defense, forces turnovers late, and wins the game.
Yeah.
I think watching us at
probably
Rutgers,
some sketchy first halves where you're up 7-3 at Utah State and you don't know really what's going on. And then they actually open up the offense.
We're running outside zone every other play, and we're just trying to run our basic stuff, trying not to show anything. I think, usually that's only non-conference games. I think you get Rutgers at home this year. It's going to behave a very similar way. I think we watched us at Rutgers last year. I think it's readily apparent Rutgers does not have the talent to play with Iowa, just based on sheer size of the players.
Yeah.
Sheer size. When Iowa played them, it was noticeable even on, you rewatching the game, how much bigger Iowa was. That plays out through the season, like the entire game. It's going to play out in this year's game as well. We're going to feel very comfortable running the ball. We're going to feel very comfortable stopping the run. It's going to be a win.
I think you can add Northwestern to that grouping as well.
Yeah, and I had this discussion in my head so many times about adding Northwestern to that auto win from what we've seen this past few years, past, decade, 2 decades. I think Pat Fitzgerald had a winning record against us. But now with, Pat leaving, that program's in turmoil. They lose their best 3 players probably from last year's team, Evan Hall and Skaronski and the great D end. You would anticipate that's not a win, but I think we have just such scar tissue towards Northwestern. That's probably a very likely win, but I have a hard time putting that auto win category.
Yeah. I'd say, it's at Wrigley Field this year too, so there's going to be a whole gaggle of Iowa fans that show up to that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's, 80-20 Iowa fans.
Yeah.
Especially with the state of the program at this moment. So
definitely.
That's going to be a really fun game to go to. But now I guess we can move into Iowa State.
Yeah, that's the first game that really has a toss-up feel to it that actually warrants discussion. I think the main storyline in that game is, Hunter Deckers is most likely not going to play. From what we've heard, and if you kind of, read and listen to the Iowa State beat writers and the Big 12 media days, the discussion with Matt Campbell, there's a lot of uncertainty about him. And generally when there's smoke, there's a fire. If he doesn't play, that game changes completely. I think, you put in most likely a true freshman Cole.
Yeah, JJ Cole will probably be the starter.
Into that game. And you think about what he needs to do to get ready for that game. He's going to have only one game against an FCS opponent in UNI before he plays Iowa.
That Iowa defense too.
Right. And imagine playing your first live Bullets true game in a big time environment against an Iowa defense that's playing, Cooper Jean in the secondary.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about this game because even if it is JJ Cole, it's going to be what we've seen from the past 5 or 6 years under Campbell. Right. I guess it's up to 7. This will be game 7 with him, I think. It's just Iowa playing Iowa with a little different scheme. So their defensive scheme is they play, essentially like a 3-3-5, where they're playing insanely passive, but how they fill is very aggressive. They'll call bullshit on your runs. They do a very good job of guessing when you're going to be passive, when you're going to be aggressive, and they keep just opposing offenses guessing all the time.
Right.
And from an Iowa perspective, we just do an insanely poor job of countering that type of defensive behavior. We haven't had virtually any success against them since they had a fully established program. I can't think of a single game where we scored over 20 points.
Since they moved to that 3-3-5, it's been a grind every game.
Yeah.
Essentially, Iowa State consistently moves the ball between the 20s better than we do. They play a more spaced out offense than we do. They generally can get easier first downs. They can get, higher percentage completions on first downs and kind of get those short yard situations. What's really defined these games until last year was the turnovers, which we still had a, decent lead last year.
Blocked 2 punts.
Yeah. But also the red zone. I think the way these teams are built, Iowa State's meant to kind of, have a high efficiency offense. Iowa's meant to get stops in the red zone and score in the red zone. And it's played out so often these last 6 years against Campbell, where when Iowa does get to the 8-yard line, 10-yard line, they can run it in.
Yep.
And when Iowa State gets there, they settle for field goals. I think, last 5 years, I would challenge you to go back and watch an Iowa State touchdown in the red zone.
Yeah.
I think the last one was actually last year,
Hutchinson,
but it was a fade route.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of defined this series. I think, again, it's going to play out the exact same way. Both these teams are really into who they are. I don't see either team changing a lot of how they're going to approach that game. I think Iowa State's okay with it being a 60-40 chance Iowa wins, but they're going to play that kind of like red zone roulette.
Yeah.
Where you go like, all right, are we going to make the play or not? But I think just not having Deckers is going to be, I mean, that would,
whoever steps in that game at QB is going to crap his pants.
Yeah.
It's just too big of a moment.
There's just no preparation for that. You're not playing, the 40th best defense, the 50th best defense. You're playing arguably a top 5 defense the last 10 years.
With such serious DB talent this year.
Yeah.
You're going to walk out there with X, Cooper, Castro, and Jamari.
Yeah. And you're not going to be able to run the ball because our defensive line has always played well against Iowa State because it's such a bigger unit.
Yeah.
It's built bigger than Iowa State's linemen are. And they're not going to have
They try and play bully ball against Iowa.
They're going to be in 3rd and 5 constantly the entire game. And you're going to have a quarterback required to make plays in that situation. That's never made a play in a college game before.
One tip pass like we saw 2 years ago gets Purdy, and all of a sudden the game flips in a moment.
Right. And so, and also, I mean, like you go back and you look at all the skill that Iowa State's had over the years. You had Montgomery, Lazard, Breece Hall, Purdy, Hutchinson, Hakeem Butler, Charlie Kohler. They've really had the skill advantage in this series under Campbell. He's done a great job of developing those guys, finding them in diamonds in the rough. He's not going to have that this year.
Yeah.
So you're going to generally Iowa's going to have advantage on the defense and offense line, and now you anticipate a quarterback and a skill advantage. I think you have to chalk this up as a win.
Yeah, I think another key consideration here too is Cade's legs.
Right.
I think something we've seen that's been so painful over the past couple of years is anytime we were in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, teams could go to a 3 front and rush 3 and feel very comfortable that they weren't going to be able to take advantage of in that scenario.
Yeah.
And having Cade, it's not going to run a 4-5, but a guy who can then exploit a team that's only going to rush 3 through a guard center scramble.
Right.
We're likely going to have him extend a couple plays and make some plays in that area where we haven't had that in the past.
Right.
And even Nate Stanley did a really good job of I think it was his 3rd time playing Iowa State. Where
2019,
second time then, where he really understood, okay, if they're going to rush 3, I have to extend this play. I cannot go 3 steps ball out and let them take advantage of this. Right. I need to force their hand here. And that's what you've seen against really good Big 12 teams do against Iowa State is call bullshit on that 3-man rush.
Right.
Is say, okay, if you're going to do this, we're going to sit in the pocket for 10 seconds, and then maybe I'm going to run or throw it deep.
Yeah, we're going to press it downfield.
Yeah.
I think we're going to chalk it up as a win, but I think we both have to we have the respect of Campbell's program.
Yeah.
I think you say Iowa likely wins this game. You feel comfortable with it, but right when that game starts, you're in Jack Trice. We'll probably be at the game this year. It's one of those environments, and it's one of those teams that he's built kind of like the PJ Fleck Minnesota team of the Big 12.
If we fall behind, we're in real trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all about how that game starts.
Yeah.
We predict a win, but no doubt Campbell's built a consistent program there. And it could get hairy if the game doesn't start how we want it to.
If you fall behind against those really passive defenses, it gets tough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think chalking up as a win is a pretty safe thing.
Yeah. I don't know about safe.
Safe with the Deckers news. I think.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's a good chance they don't score a touchdown.
Yeah.
And
Deckers,
I think. I mean, but we might not either. We don't. We don't know. Yes, we have an offensive injection of talent. We don't know what Brian will do with that talent.
Right. And if that Kirk, if he doesn't see a QB that can move the ball, that means we're going to turtle up. Do not lose a game.
We are happy to announce a new sponsor for the ANF Podcast. The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
So the next kind of critical game after Iowa State, obviously we have Western Michigan. We're not going to discuss that. That's a win.
Yeah.
Is the toughest game of the season. And arguably, we had Ohio State and Michigan at home previous year. At Penn State this year is equal with those games.
Yeah.
Penn State, their expectations for this year are Big Ten championship playoff. And it's warranted. They're loaded. They have 2 incredible running backs. They bring in Trey Potts from Minnesota. They bring back a good amount of their offensive line, 1 first rounder. Their tight end room is loaded. Their receivers are always good. And their defense has returners in all 3 levels of the ball.
Yeah.
And most importantly, Drew Allard is our QB.
Yeah.
They got a dog, a 5-star who's
top QB in the country 2 years
throw
ago.
on his film, you throw on his 20 pass stints from last year. He's going to be a first round draft pick one day.
Yeah.
So it's not just your general Penn State team where they're going to be better than Iowa. Usually they're a tier up of just talent and coaching. Now you stick a quarterback in that system that can also, hurt you in a lot of different ways.
And this is what's exciting about this Iowa team. And what's great about the positioning of this game within the season is we're going to learn so much about them right then.
Yeah.
And whether we have, aspirations of a Big Ten West title, a Big Ten title in general, it's all going to be fleshed out in kind of one moment here.
Yeah.
And what we really need to see, if granted, even if this is a loss, say we lose by 10 or by 7.
Yeah, you give a late score, you lose by 2 scores.
Yeah. But if we move the ball in an environment like that, that will be just a great marker for what the rest of the season will behold. Because I think what we could see here, and granted, I think the chances are low we win this game. I'd say probably 20% at best.
Yeah.
But this might be the first season where we have that balanced attack.
Yeah.
And what I mean is that we have a defense that's incredible, but then we have an offense that can actually complement them. Say you get an early score, you go up 7-0 against Penn State. You now are playing a QB who's playing his first big game of his life against a very, very talented defense. And they're not running the ball very well. Yeah. I don't think Penn State's going to run the ball exceptionally well.
They just haven't run the ball well under Franklin.
Yeah.
Their system doesn't really lean into the ability to run for 100 yards consistently. 2021, the last time I played them, they ran for like 2 or 3 yards of carry with their running backs.
Yeah.
They're not going to run the ball against us. It's just going to be that.
But then you can almost play out a scenario where a QB isn't prepared to check down 45 times in a game.
Right.
And that's where we've seen these, experienced QBs tied to coaches who played Iowa system a ton. Even Jeff Brom, he had just Parker timed up on when to take chances. But if a QB just starts to question whether, okay, I'm not comfortable with a 12-play drive. I don't want to be out here for 12 plays. I want to try and make a couple plays. I'm at home in a big game. I'm going to take the chance here and there. If we can just get a QB to be slightly uncomfortable against us and not just ball out after every 3-step drop to the flats, there is a realm where if we can take an early lead, this could get very hairy for them.
Yeah. I keep on going back to Penn State's not just a better recruited team. They're a better coach team than Iowa.
Yeah.
When they came into our building, that 4-3 matchup in 2021, biggest game in Iowa City since like 1985. Their offensive game plan was probably the best we've seen against a Phil Parker defense in the last 5 years. The way they kept no huddling, forcing us into cover 4 consistently, running their QB, throwing to the flats. It felt so like, wow, they've never, no team's ever cracked Iowa that well.
Yeah.
And their first 4 drives, I think, all went to a red zone, maybe first 3.
Yeah, because Clifford threw a pick on the
right. And if Clifford doesn't get hurt in that game, I have a hard time believing we'll come back.
It was the first pick on the first drive, 3 straight good drives, pick on the 5th drive.
Right.
But
it was the first. I mean, it's Penn State. Like, the coordinators that go there, they're not getting paid. Not a lot. Like, they're getting paid well. They're in the same line of their players.
Yeah.
Like, that's a great position to be in, to be an O coordinator or D coordinator there. When Iowa plays Penn State, it feels like that.
Yeah. Well, I think last time when we were playing them, we had so many times where we just look at each other like they're getting the exact look they want every time.
Right. With better personnel.
With better it wasn't even like, I think it was just schematically they were just better. And yes, they had better personnel, but there was just times where it's a very frustrating thing about Iowa's defense is where if a team goes 2 tight ends, no matter what, we go back to our 4-3.
Right.
Regardless of how they're playing it. Penn State and Minnesota do a very good job of, especially Penn State, where Penn State would play 2 tight ends and then play their tight end as the most wide receiver. So now you're sticking what was Justin Jacobs out, 10 yards outside the tackle and asking him to play these complex coverages where he doesn't know how to get enough depth.
Right.
And honestly, Justin really struggled in those moments where he would get baited by the underneath receiver. They get beat behind him.
Right. Play action. Really.
It was just really frustrating to watch it in the stands and be like, gosh, they're just continuously
getting what they want.
Yeah. And then on the opposite side of the ball, it's a press man team. I think
it's a bad matchup.
It's a bad matchup, but for this year, it's very interesting because you have now 2 man beaters. I don't think Lachey is going to be an exceptional man beater. I don't think he's got the speed, but All and Brown will be man beaters.
Right.
And I mean, that's a lot to project out Brown. I've seen enough of his film where I know he's going to be fast enough to at least beat someone on a slant.
Give him a little something to think about.
Something to think about over the top too.
Yeah.
And All is truly a man beater. Like you can use him in a litany of ways and get him open. I think he will be the guy that we lean on the most when teams go man to man.
Yeah, and I think you bring up man beaters being the key to this game. I think it's going to be the offensive line. I think the only way I can envision us playing this game is that we see a true leap. Yeah. Because if we can't hold on to the ball and we can't get, pin them deep, play an Iowa football type of game where special teams becomes an issue for them.
Yeah.
We're just not going to be able to play with them. Not in that environment, not with that type of talent, not with that type of coaching staff. If we can make it a gross game, if we can run the ball and take them out of rhythm on offense where they only have like 6 plays in the quarter, I can see it. But I don't think it's so much the receivers that we can get a few first downs with. I think we have to legitimately square them up and run the ball in that game. And I think
because we're going to try and suck the time.
The first thing you mentioned was we need to see a leap in that game. We'll know exactly who Iowa is.
Yeah.
If we're trading possessions, maybe we don't make the play. That's going to be a huge signifier of how good we are this season. But it's going to become the run game, and the run game will define this season as well.
Yeah.
You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
So we're going to have a loss. So
that's
we're
a loss, yeah.
1-1 in the critical games. The next game is Michigan State at home, which is a really interesting program right now. Last time we played them, we smoked them at home in 2020 by 50. Hard to take anything from that game. We jumped on them early. Iowa kind of had exercised some demons in that game after having started 0-2. Michigan State's in a weird spot. Just lost their starting QB and best receiver to the transfer portal after the spring semester and spring ball. So essentially the only thing Michigan State's done well in these last 3 years under Tucker is they had Kenneth Walker and won a lot of close games, and they chucked the deep ball at a very good,
exceptional rate.
Yeah,
which does give Iowa problems.
It does.
Teams
I was going to bring that up.
Teams that throw the deep ball well and are confident in their ability to complete it have always given Phil Parker's defenses problems.
Low Brahmy.
It is. And it's outside the numbers throws. And if you're very good at it, most teams don't practice that throw very often.
Yeah.
Just a low percentage throw, but it can really hurt a team like Iowa. That the way we coach our cornerbacks to approach those plays, we're very passive in how we don't like pass interference calls. Phil hates those. So we allow receivers to, have subtle push-offs. Yeah. And physical receivers who can make plays over the top have had success against us. I think another key thing to mention here too is Michigan State's defense is just one of the most poorly coached units we've ever watched.
Right.
We watched them against Minnesota last year, and I wasn't able to watch that game, but I followed on my phone. And my takeaway was that Minnesota was going to be maybe a Big Ten championship because every single possession I watched was a 15-yard gain, 15-yard gain.
Yeah. And
then I went back and watched it, and I could not believe how poorly schemed up they were for that game.
Oh, it's just
horrible. It was outside leverage man-to-man against an RPO team that only throws slants.
Yeah.
And Minnesota got the look they wanted every single play, and they never changed out of it. And I was like, how does this guy have a job?
Right.
And he just got paid. He's the second highest paid coach in the country. I don't know if he is now. But after that season he had, where he had Kenneth Walker, who's like a top 10 back in the NFL now.
Yeah.
That's just a critical error.
Yeah. I hard time envisioning, you listen to the beat writer talk and write about a team. They're probably going to be 7-5 to 5-7.
Yeah.
Their run game and offensive line, they don't expect big leaps. They were bad last year. A lot of those guys are back, returning starters, but Jalen Berger at running back's not a great back.
Yep.
You kind of take their one key strength is that deep ball. Now you have a new QB and all their receivers are gone. Sounds like the strength of their team might be their front seven, which could lead to a closer game.
Yeah.
But just with how we've seen that defense play in these last few years, I have a hard time believing that at home we don't win that game like 24-10.
Well, it's just another game where I don't know if they'll score a touchdown.
Right.
If you're bringing in a new QB, no marketable receiver talent.
Yeah.
Offensive line struggle last year.
Yeah.
Where this is an Iowa defense where unless you can do something exceptionally well, I will not believe that you will score a touchdown, which is insane to say. But the way this is building out is you have the most talented defensive line, maybe not most talented, but deepest defensive line with some really exceptional players that are in Graves and Craig and
right.
But and then the back end is just going to tackle and play so well that
there's just not going to be. There's no busted coverages, no busted assignments in the front four and the back four.
Yeah.
If Iowa plays that way, you're not going to run consistently, and you're not going to get 40-yard plus touchdowns.
You got to throw a couple picks too.
So that sounds like 10-play drives.
Yeah.
So do you have an offense that can go 10-play drives consistently? If you don't, I have a hard time picking you to beat us, because we're going to make the play at some point. We're going to get a pick, get a turnover. Offense, let's go 40 yards.
Yeah.
Our special teams are always going to be better.
Yeah.
So if you can't press our buttons on offense, or when you're on offense in a way, or you have some exceptional defensive, unit this year, I'm going to lean to Iowa being favored and should win the game. I think that's how it plays out in this situation.
Yeah, and
if it's on the road, maybe a different game. Michigan State's kind of been that more emotional team these last few years, where you can tell when they get an edge to them, they play well. Like they played Michigan super tough last year when they were not playing well. Yeah. They beat the Illini when they came in, and it was like, how the hell they do that? They were playing poorly, but like they get up for games and they go down for games. Outside of division, they play poorly because I don't think there's that edge in the coaching staff and the care. At home, I think it's a win.
Yeah. It's fair. I'll take it as a win as well.
Yeah. So we got Purdue at home next. So this kind of brings up like a major topic in the Big Ten West, which is, Hudson Card at Purdue, Texas transfer 4-star. But this is like, as we mentioned in the start of the episode, there's been a huge influx of quarterbacks, 4-star quarterbacks into the Big Ten West.
Yep.
And this is also a new coach as well. He's coming over from the Illini as a defensive coordinator. He's going to run the identical system, it sounds like, this year. We read a lot about Purdue's offense and listened to them. It sounds like their offensive personnel is going to be lacking.
Yep. Offensive line talent sounds like it's going to be pretty poor.
So they're
going to the receivers they brought up too. I was like, oh,
right.
Sheffield's the guy you're looking for a big moment out of.
Yeah, it's like a committee room at receiver.
Yeah.
You're at Graham Harrell at OC, so they're going to chuck the ball around a lot. Maccabee's a good back.
Yeah.
But it sounds like
their tight ends too, though.
Right. It sounds like they're going to be throwing the ball a lot in that system with receivers that aren't going to scare you, and they're going to have a hard time running the ball. Once again, it's that kind of same formula Michigan State's going to have. You're going to be coming with a new system. Are you going to be able to move the ball consistently against us? Braum really had us numbered out.
Braum leaving the Big Ten is so big for Iowa.
Yeah.
He was the only guy I've ever watched that like could time up Parker better than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
He understood when Parker's down by 7 points or 4 points and you have the ball late in the game, Parker's going to finally get aggressive, and then he would throw deep. And he just always seemed to know what Parker's next step was.
Yeah.
And for him to leave and now Purdue to shift to a defensive-minded coordinator,
right,
who might have not even been the brainchild of the Illinois defense. I mean,
Bielema there's a possibility there.
There's a possibility that was the wrong hire.
Yeah.
And maybe some AD got talked into, okay, this guy's got the top defense in the country at Illinois, but it's because he had 5 DBs who are going to the NFL and the best D line.
3 of them drafted, 1
UDFA.
Yeah.
And then 4 of the best D linemen in the country too.
Right. And I think you look at,
they played man-to-man 5 front. It's not like it was some genius scheme where,
like
when I watched like Penn State play Ohio State a couple years, like this is an unbelievable scheme.
Yeah.
They were playing man-to-man. We're bigger and stronger and faster.
Cover 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Throw it deep.
Yeah.
And also I think why you have confidence in this game is just, it's a radical change for Purdue. Like you're going to be focused on, a defensive team now, and that type of culture change you're trying to make in 1 year. Obviously, they're bringing a lot of transfers in from the SEC. I think that does give you some pause about Purdue. You listen to who they brought on the D line, their front 7.
Yeah.
They have a very good DN that they anticipate to be good.
Yeah.
But I think the key to that scheme is the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
And Cam Allen's obviously a great safety, but they're bringing in transfers to play corner. And if you can't have a really locked down man corner in that scheme, a hard time you're going to be, exceptional. But I think it's just too much transition in that program right now to consider them for.
There are 5 wins for the season total for a reason.
Right. For us not to pick Iowa. I think Hudson Card was kind of that big sticker, QB signing. Once again, he's a 4-star coming from Texas, and Cade wasn't. And I find it funny that Altmaier, Card, Sims, and one other QB too I'm not thinking of. They all come in. They're all higher rated than Cade is. But you look on these guys' films, and they're 4-minute Mordecai.
Mordecai.
you look at their film, they got a 4-minute highlight film playing at SMU, or Altmaier's never played a snap in college football. Sims is, struggled at Georgia Tech in a sense. And Cade's film is a 12-0 season, winning the Big Ten title, going to the playoff, and it's 21 minutes long.
Yeah.
He's a 3-star.
Yeah.
The rest are 4 stars. It's, as Cade, I've already you get the sense Cade's got a little chip on his shoulder. I'm guessing that's going to play into it a little bit. But going back to Card, you throw in his film, you get why he's a 4-star. He's got legs. He's got a pretty big arm. He's got pretty good accuracy. But he raises their floor where he's not going to lose them a game, which is essentially where the West is now. Mm-hmm. Every West QB will not lose them a game based on his skill.
Yep.
Do I believe he's going to take them above to get to the 8-win mark or beat Iowa? I don't think so.
I think he's just your typical Big Ten starter.
Yeah.
When I watched his couple games at Texas, you see him make the makeable throws. A couple of them are fairly impressive. You see him use his legs when he needs to, but neither of them, his arm talent doesn't leap off the screen. Mm-hmm. His legs don't leap off the screen.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to mix in subpar talent against a really exceptional defense, this is another team I think might struggle to score a touchdown. As odd as that is to say for Purdue,
right?
Who's had so much success against us in recent years. Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be the final. I think this might end up being a bad hire for Purdue. Mm-hmm. I think going to this, we don't know if he was the brainchild,
right?
And then you're going to Graham Harrell hasn't been exactly a world beater at OC. Mm-hmm. I could see this being a downturn for Purdue pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. So I think we have that as a win as well.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next game. Ooh, this would be interesting. At Wisconsin. So obviously, same playbook as Purdue. New head coach, massive overhaul of what they want to be as a program. Maybe not for Purdue as much. They want to still chuck the ball.
Yeah.
Wisco still wants to play defense. But you bring in Tanner Mordecai, you bring in a USC transfer receiver, a receiver from Cincinnati, and I think one more 4-star they brought in as well. But they're going to chuck it. Like, Wisco is probably making the biggest heel turn of any program in the last 2 decades in college football.
Yeah, it's like if I guess Georgia Tech kind of did go spread, but essentially it's like Army going and saying we're going to play
seriously
spread offense.
And so I think when you think like Wisconsin's the favorite in the Big Ten West, obviously they've been probably the most talented team across the board the last decade in terms of.
If it wasn't for Brian Ferentz, Iowa would be a clear favorite, in my opinion. But they just. Writers can't get over this whole
25 game
narrative of Brian can't coach, nepotism that's going to kill him.
Yeah.
Wisconsin being favored is a little bit silly in my mind.
Yeah, and they say it's an easy schedule. You still have Ohio State at home.
Yeah. Got to go at Minnesota.
Yep. But it's a radical change for this program. Obviously, their linemen are been recruited to play power football. They're downhill guys. Braylon Allen was recruited to play downhill football. He's still going to be a good back, but he's not meant to play out shotgun.
Not meant to play, getting the ball in his gut and saying, okay, you have 5 gaps to go to, pick one.
Right. Their receiving core you've always want them to throw receivers.
Yeah.
That's always been the goal for Wisconsin, is them to throw the receivers. Obviously bring in good receiver talent.
But we dug into those guys, and I wouldn't say I'm terrified of any of them.
No.
Former 5-star, but he barely played at USC.
Yeah.
But
I think, you have Mordecai coming in. I think that's the key piece of why I'm kind of down on Wisconsin is, you had Drake May under Wisconsin's coordinator at UNC the previous year. Obviously, the offense is going to play well. Drake May is going to be a top 5 pick this year. Now you're going to Tanner Mordecai, who you watch the spring game. He didn't look comfortable in that offense. He threw 3 picks in the first 3 possessions in the spring game. He doesn't have a massive arm. He's not, some freak athlete. And when you play that type of spread offense where you're really going to spread it around to a bunch of receivers and play that pace, your quarterback's your best player. And the purpose of why Fickell is doing this is to recruit the quarterback position to Wisconsin. You're trying to essentially compete with Ohio State in terms of getting those big-time recruits and the big-time receiver recruits. But I don't agree with the decision.
Yeah.
Because at Wisconsin, you're not going to grow quarterbacks in your backyard. You're not going to grow receivers in your backyard. So now your only way to reach your ceiling that you have hired Fickell for to now compete with Ohio State, that's what Wisconsin looks up to. They want to be Ohio State in this new era. You now have to go beat out USC, Alabama, UNC to a sort. Both the coast schools
in a cold environment
and the SEC schools, then Michigan and Ohio State. as well from the Big Ten. So you're most likely still grabbing the 15th best dual threat QB in the country because you have to beat out all the Big 12 schools as well.
And the SEC.
And so you're going to play this system where you're going to require a true 4-star, not just some,
Graham
low
Mertz.
4-star.
Yeah.
You need a guy who comes in and is like playing the NFL. That's the only way you run that system because he's going to be throwing the ball 30 times in the game. He's going to be making a bunch of decisions at the line.
Yeah.
You need a real QB. So I don't agree with the decision. I think Fickell's a great coach. I think what he's done defensive end is going to be very difficult for Iowa to play against because he's going to be, in a way, more aggressive Campbell.
Yeah.
Like he's going to be very multiple in his front. He's going to blitz a lot. He's going to have very confusing coverages. But his decision on offense is, I think it's more Frost-like than it is Fleck-like. Fleck has built a very consistent offense at Minnesota. Frost wanted to kind of build a similar program at Nebraska. We want to bring in these 4-stars. We want to have this really aggressive toward offense where we can attract this talent. I think that's where Fickell's leading more towards where he might, he might raise the ceiling if he can hit that point where they can recruit QBs, but he also might bring it down to they might be a 6-6 team for a few years in a row if they can't move the ball consistently.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I always just had such a difficult time handling that power offense. And since we did play against it a lot better when we were a larger defense, prior to the shift to having smaller DNs, smaller linebackers, Ferentz had a great record against those original Wisconsin teams because we could match their size. And then once we went smaller to actually adapt to the rest of the Big Ten, we really struggled to, stop that power run game.
Right.
And there's been nothing more painful to watch than those 4 and 5 yard games over and over and over again.
Right.
So for them to move away from that style of football where you actually had the offensive line talent to execute that with the running back talent to say, okay, we're Wisconsin, we're going to move down to the spread game. It's like, that's another gift. It's a lot like the Purdue hire where it's like, oh, no more Brown. Okay. No more power football for Wisconsin. Thank God. And as you mentioned, Mordecai, when you just watch him play, he's an average to below average Big Ten QB. I don't see the talent leap off the screen like I see with some other guys.
Yeah.
And if, like you said, if you're going to rely on him to be your star and you're going to, because it's not going to be Braylon Allen.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hurry up and run game, but it's not going to
Allen's not going to have the focal point of the offense as much as he did in the previous offense.
And tight ends are going to die for them too.
Exactly. And I think that's what the strength of their team was. Yeah. Running back, tight end, line. Yeah. And this kind of pushes.
Now you're saying QB receiver are our best players in Wisconsin
this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe it works in 2 years if you recruit to that level. But for this year, how can you make that offense the favorite in the West when they have to have a complete overhaul of how they play football, how they recruited? It just doesn't make sense to me.
No. As much as success,
could Iowa lose? They could still lose.
Yes.
You go into Camp Randall, it's gonna be.
They'll probably be underdogs.
Right.
Maybe we'll see how it plays out.
They anticipate Wisconsin be favorites in 11 of their games this year.
But again,
do they deserve to be?
But that's given Fickell so much credit. Granted, they did when they got to the college football playoff game, they did compete in that game, which was impressive. Was Alabama maybe slow playing a little bit and then blowing them out the second half?
They did a month to prepare for the game.
But you also have to remember that Cincinnati team that they had with Desmond Ridder went to Indiana and should have lost that game if it wasn't for a personal foul call and Indiana's linebacker getting hurt. Or
McFadden.
Yeah. And that was a 4-win Indiana team.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where you wonder if Fickell was kind of hiding out. And now it's going to come home to roost where you're not playing 3 games a season where you're actually open your schematics and say, okay, here's our best plays, here's what we can really do. You're going to get pushed every single game in the Big Ten. Do you have a consistent enough idea of what how to win football games?
And I think his initial idea on offense is a bad idea.
Guy won 6 games with Ohio State players.
Yeah. And Braxton Miller.
But
it's hard because it was a transition year. I have a hard time putting that on him. I just think truly his offensive idea at Wisconsin is not a good idea. Yeah. That's my take. What's your final?
I think we win that game.
I think we win too. Yeah. I truly, because I think the overhaul is too great. I think they could be kicking back to us in 3 plays in 40 seconds of possession time.
Yeah.
And Iowa, if we can play our Big Ten West football and introduce Fickell to it and say, you can't run that hurry up against us. Yeah. You're not going to run for more than 3 yards in that, a 5-man only offensive line set. Maybe we have an opportunity to, jump on them early for the first time in, a decade. If we get 2-score lead at one point.
Yeah.
But I do think Iowa wins that game just because the overhaul is too great for them.
Yeah.
Actually, now moving on to the Gophers at home. Truly, Iowa probably should have lost this game the last 2 years.
We could have lost the game last 5 years.
Yeah.
Besides 2020.
Right.
Which isn't a real season.
Yeah. They're, as we talked about, Iowa State's kind of like dominate between the 20s against Iowa. Minnesota's scheme is meant for that.
Did they run for 300 yards last year too? Because I know they did the year prior.
Yeah.
So 2 years in a row, they've ran for over 300 yards.
Yeah. And we've refused to commit to it.
Yeah.
We refuse to roll that safety down, even when we do. They just.
I think it's such a moment where we go, yes, do that all you want, but in the red zone, you do not have the receiver talent, and we can now commit more guys to the run game.
Right. Our safeties are now 7 yards off the ball now.
Yeah, and they tackle.
Right.
They're not. That is like what Iowa football is predicated on, is we are going to back up and then play red zone defense, where our defense is built for the red zone.
Right. It's our entire program is built for the red zone.
Yeah.
It doesn't play out as well on offense, but on defense it does. Like if you actually look, I think some Twitter profile created who's the heaviest team in the Big Ten, and Iowa was number 1.
Yeah.
It's like, we're playing for the red zone. Our defenders are built for the red zone.
Safeties they're just big guys.
Yeah.
And they hit.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, that's the case for a lot of teams, but
our DNs are bigger than usual.
Yeah.
Our linebackers are bigger than usual. Like
corners are even too.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's so funny because we hate PJ Fleck. I can't think of a guy I can't stand more within college football than PJ Fleck.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we've been able to keep this run going against him, we had quite the moment. I wasn't sitting with you for the Minnesota game, but I was about as obnoxious as I've ever been in the road stadium. And I feel bad doing it to Gopher fans because they are so nice, but it's so much fun to do.
Yeah.
I did get shoved a couple times on the way out, but this win streak we've gone on against them has just been, it's been like improbable at moments too.
It has been. Yeah. It feels like they deserve at least 1, maybe 2.
Yeah. And
this year for them, it's kind of like their first big reset year for PJ. Like he has the hardest schedule Minnesota's had since he's been there. You lose kind of like the old guard of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Like Schmitz at center's been there for
Tanner Morgan, Mo Ibrahim.
Right. There's been so many players like
Sorry Marin.
Right.
Yeah.
And they've definitely hit their ceiling at Minnesota. It feels like it's like, I think now a 9-win season is their cap, the way they've built themselves and the way they've recruited, and his recruiting pitch is dying. You don't have
them never taking the leap at receiver that they started with, where you thought like, oh
right.
Wow, they can keep this recruiting momentum at receiver. They're going to be a talent, a team to mess with.
Yeah.
But since that's fallen off and they haven't trusted receiver play for the last 2 seasons, their team is just the least explosive team in the country besides Iowa's.
Yeah, but I still think this year they're going to play their ball. Like,
yeah,
their O-line is obviously some big turnover there, but they're going to be starting, 5 guys that are upperclassmen, maybe 1 guy that's not, but they're still going to be old on the offensive line. They still are going to be, strong at safety. Newbin, they have some really high, like, great players in weird positions like Coughlin, or it's not Coughlin, but
Lindenberg.
Yeah.
Linebacker. Yeah.
Yep. And then you got, now I can't think of their tight end name either.
Oh, Spanford.
Yeah. They've just like NFL players at multiple levels on offense and defense. If it wasn't a difficult schedule for them this year, I could see 10 wins possibly.
If they didn't have the most brutal schedule in the Big Ten, I would probably take them to win the West.
Right.
Because I think Kakliamanis is actually really talented.
Yep. It sounds like they trust their receivers more this year. They're going to play, more of that RPO system they have in the past, not being
even with their schedule though, I still think we beat them at home though.
Yeah.
It's just one of those products where we've seen coaches getting these kind of bugaboos against Ferentz where they don't know whether to be aggressive or whether to be passive. And PJ has chose the very passive route forever against Ferentz. I think in 2021 at home, he kicked 2 or 3 field goals with like less than 2 or 3 yards to go.
Mm-hmm.
And almost every team goes from the scenarios, but he was on the impression, okay, our defense is playing really well.
Right.
And then it bit him in the ass.
Yeah.
And there's something like how you should approach playing Iowa's defense is very passive. You should take what they're giving you because they are going to give you yards. Mm-hmm. But when you get in moments where you can score touchdowns, you have to take those opportunities because you're not going to get many of them. Mm-hmm. Just have a well-designed play. Believe in, and maybe they will more with Kakliamanis because he's got more legs and they can trust him to make a playoff schedule. But
his legs will definitely play in this year too.
Yeah.
Like that's the one aspect they haven't had in a while. And that pull out of that inside zone and outside zone is going to be deadly.
Yeah. But I think Iowa's done such a good job of being able to, counter players' talents. I know we'll have it baked in. We'll let them do it early in the game and say, okay,
not in the red zone.
Not in the red zone, though.
Yeah.
And I think, again, if you're not going to have superior receiver talent, or you're going to struggle to score touchdowns against Iowa.
Yeah. I think I view this as more of a toss-up game than most people do. I think their system just lends to going to be close games. I think Kirk feels very comfortable in that game to let it be close. You know, they haven't made the plays the last few years. I think they have enough skill to give us a great game. Obviously, they're such an established program now. Like,
yeah,
you might have turnover, but like the same reason why you have expectations for like Higgins and other players that are like stepping up this year for us, you kind of have to imbue that upon Minnesota players as well.
Yeah.
And I think I view this as probably the third hardest game on our schedule this year. And it would not surprise me if they finally don't hit the tip pass in Campbell's arms. Ibrahim doesn't put the ball in the dirt on the 15-yard line. I think, if you made me pick probably our hardest home game, this would be tied
I don't think their defense is very good.
Yeah.
I think this will be the year where them playing that aggressive single high man-to-man is finally going to burn them. Because you're going to have all in Caleb Brown.
Right.
And those two guys will be better than the guys that are guarding them. I would put my life on it. And then you're also going to have Cade, who's not going to miss simple throws.
Right.
You remember last year's Minnesota game, we went up 10-0 and Laporta got hurt, and we didn't have an offense. We didn't have a man beater on the whole team.
Yeah. And Minnesota's gotten away with it. Like, there's a reason why some Big Ten West programs have been able to been ranked in the top 10 on efficiency scale on defense, just because it hasn't been quarterback and receiver play in the entire division.
Yeah.
That's changed now.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have real quarterbacks and real receivers almost every school.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's more a toss-up game in my opinion. I think 60-40 Iowa is how
I would go farther than that. I'd go 70-30. Just because schematically they just don't match up well.
Right.
That RPO thrown in the middle of the field, that doesn't work against teams that play predominantly zone. They have a lot of success outside of the Iowa game because they can put pressure on teams with that man-to-man beater. But if we're gonna let you run the ball between the 20s again, but if you're not going to score touchdowns, it's going to be awfully tough to win a game on the road.
Yeah. So I think we still both have it as a win.
Yeah.
And truly, this is where the schedule flips. Like, if Iowa can go one loss in this, essentially the end of October, you're going to have a lot of hype in the national media, be ranked, and really Iowa fans are going to get a little delusional about what they could do to finish out the season if we predict where they're going to be at this point. Because the next game is at Northwestern, which now we've kind of said it doesn't feel like an auto win, but with everything going on in that program, they're just current roster makeup, no transfer portal players because of academics. That feels like a win. Then you go Rutgers at home.
Dang.
So you go back-to-back games where essentially one of those could be a bye week in a kind of a format.
Yeah.
Especially Rutgers.
Especially Rutgers at home, yeah.
And then you bring the Illini.
Man.
And that is a massive game.
You go in one loss into that game.
Right.
And that's college football playoff implications on the line.
Even 2 loss to the right team there.
Yeah.
Like
Iowa State or Michigan State.
Or you lose, maybe lose to Minnesota. Minnesota gets 2 losses on Ohio State. Michigan blows another one.
Yeah.
That's still for the West. This is where I've just seen Bielema own Ferentz.
Yeah.
And the way he's built his team, it's just the correct way to play in the Big Ten. And this is where I see Iowa's second loss coming. And hopefully it doesn't cost him a West Division title. But the way Bielema's built that 5 front, basically forcing, teams like Iowa and Wisconsin and Minnesota to evolve and play, more spread out and throw the ball. And just the returning talent they have. You can bring back Newton, you bring back Randolph on the D-line. Those guys are going to the NFL. Newton was first team All Big Ten, nearly first team All American. Randolph was second team All Big Ten, was like now preseason All American. That's your 2 D tackles. You're going to be putting Iowa in a bind the entire time. They have a better approach on offense. They spread you out a little more. Reggie Love at running back is a hell of a player. I think, he's a little underrated for coming into this season, I think. And then Isaiah Williams at receiver, just enough to create, enough of an offense there. Like, there's no one at receiver that we can feel confident is better in Iowa than him.
Yeah.
Altmaier is a huge question mark, but I think I'm just so jaded towards Bielema at any school in the Big Ten.
I think Altmaier has enough legs to give us problems.
Right.
And just enough arm to actually exploit us maybe over that. I don't know about over the top throws. When Phil doesn't feel like you can beat him over the top with a nice throw, teams seem to struggle a lot. So then we're constantly in cover 3 roll down.
Right.
And then run game gets a lot more difficult. I remember last year they had a really good O-line, and they're going to be a little thinner in the O-line this year. And I think with the amount of turnover they had in the DB room, and again, it just these teams that play this incredibly aggressive man-to-man, we're going to have more answers to that this year.
Right.
You're going to have more accurate QB. You're going to have scenarios where you can run guys off and then run Cade in QB draws and let him scramble. Man-to-man on 3rd and 5 is just not going to be the play that kills us as much as it used to.
Right.
You're going to have to. The teams are going to have to run more zone. But I do agree with Bielema being a bit of a bugaboo at this point, because you had so many lucky plays last year and you couldn't execute on anything, and everything looked impossibly difficult for us. And if you don't take jumps on the O-line, which I'm still very suspect that we're going to have
a big leap,
a competent,
which you're going to need a big leap to play against that D-line.
Yeah. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a special teams game. Like if we're going to win this game, Cooper's going to have to make a play in the punt return
Torres
game.
Going to pinch him.
Torres going to have to pin him a couple times.
Right.
They're going to have to turn the ball over, fumble. With the first QB for them, it still lends me to think that we'll probably beat them, because I don't see that offense. Again, it's going to be another offense. If Isaiah Williams, he's a great player, but if they don't have anyone else to throw out there, they got Washington as the other receiver.
Yeah.
Not going to give us any problems.
They got a younger guy too. That's like going to be a true junior. I can't think of his name.
They're going to be very patient on offense, but it's going to be kind of what we saw last year with them. It's like if you're patient, that 4th first down, Phil can all of a sudden just switch up a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're in 3rd and 7. You don't feel comfortable with your QB.
Yeah.
So I do get it's going to be a gross game. We're not going to run the ball at all.
Yeah.
And when we can't run, Ferentz gets freaked out.
Right, especially at home.
Going to be throwing
especially in a big game. So you can tell it's going to be one of those games where Kirk really wants to keep it tight. And Bielema's kind of got that little more edge to him, a little more
aggressive.
Turn the knife. And I think it's going to when I just think about that D line against us, Bielema's going to be where he wants to be. He's going to have just a little more aggressiveness in his scheme as a whole. It already plays out that way.
This will be the game that Caleb Brown or all has to get behind someone.
Right. You really need a play from.
You need a big play.
This is where McNamara is going to be critical. Is that you have to throw in this game. Truly, our O-line would not take the leap it needs to. To
block these guys.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen this year. You're not going to block 2 NFL D linemen.
No, we don't have it. We might have an NFL player on the O-line.
Right. We didn't block bad college linemen last year. Now you're going to block 2 good NFL linemen. I don't see that. And so I'd say this is the loss in the schedule. I think in my mind, how I view why we're getting down to it, but I'm predicting 10-2. It's because I think the Illini game, I think the Wisconsin game, I don't like their scheme, but I think just on the road, and I think the Minnesota game. I think out of those 3 opponents, it's the 3 true teams in the West that can beat us and that are true contenders in this year. We will drop one of those games. I think it's the way we play. I don't think our run game's going to be actually where we need it to be.
Yeah.
And I think one of those games will, get caught.
Yeah.
But moving on to the last game, I think so. You think win for that game? I think
I'm going to go win just because of QB play.
Right. You think?
I think we'll have the better QB.
Yeah. Now you think of, now the last game at Nebraska, which is we've had a lot of detailed discussion about Rule. We think as much as we've kind of talked shit about Fickle and the entire hire there, which everyone else is high on, so it's hard to have a hard take on that. But
yeah.
I think Rule is a great hire for Nebraska. I think the way he's approaching that program,
it's steady. I like how he's not playing into the Nebraska hype.
Right.
When Frost showed up, he did you better get us early because we're going to be Big Ten.
Right.
If you approach a rebuild as like a steady, we're going to build a culture. We're going to get steadily better every day. A lot of details.
Right.
Especially at a place like Nebraska where it's like, what they've done a really poor job is going the ego route, especially in the recruiting process.
Right.
So then you get into these seasons where you lose 2 games in the first 4.
Yeah.
And those guys who came here to win a Big Ten title now don't have a lot of interest.
Right. You start 2021 and 2022 with losses to the Illini, Northwestern. the majority of that locker room under Frost and the guys they recruited and what they sold to those guys was to compete for a Big Ten title. Now they're not even going to win the division. Yeah. Now they're not even going to probably make a bowl after those type of losses. And the entire ego of the team, the entire culture of the team crumbles. It doesn't seem like it's going to be under Rule. Rule's going to have a different approach. And Rule's a guy that he went into an NFL GM's room and convinced him to be hired as an NFL coach. There's 32 jobs in the NFL. The caliber of intelligence, scheme, charisma, ideas you need to have to get hired at an NFL level is a step above the Big Ten West and a step above the Big Ten. You see it when Harbaugh comes back and when he comes in game plans against Iowa, what that looks like. This is one of those brains that's coming back into the college fold, and he's going to build it the right way. I think his floor is Iowa State and Minnesota under PJ Fleck and Matt Campbell. The way he's kind of approaching this program, I think he's going to bring them to a consistently a 9-win program. And I think if you talk to a Nebraska fan, honestly, they don't anticipate to play for national titles ever again. I think if the reasonable ones, I think he's going to bring them back to a level where they're going to feel confident being a 10-win, 9-win program on a consistent basis because he's going to build it the right way, was still getting that Nebraska allure of their type of recruits they can get at their skill positions.
Yeah, you're going to have talented skill players, but it's going to be a stronger culture.
Right, and a defensive-minded team too. Like they brought in the Syracuse D coordinator who's done a hell of a job there. He's going to run a modern defensive set similar to Campbell's. It's going to be based on simplicity.
That's what terrifies me about this game.
Right.
Is knowing what they're bringing in on the defensive end. Yes, they're going to be super young on the D-line. I think they mentioned that they're going to have 2 or 3 freshmen that are going to play some significant minutes. But they were big-time recruits. And by game 12 of a season, a lot of those guys are going to be playing good football by then.
It's not a year 1 program in game 12.
No, it's not. And then Jeff Sims, I watched 2 minutes of his tape at Georgia Tech, and I was like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Because it's a guy that has really, truly exceptional arm talent. Where we're asking you to throw outside the numbers. That's what Iowa football does. We say throw outside the numbers or throw underneath.
Yeah.
He throws outside the numbers well.
Yeah.
He has arm talent to do that. He's going to have the receiver talent to do it.
Yeah.
He also has legs. So we build our defensive linemen a little faster, a little slower.
Yeah.
If you can block as well in the first preliminary 2 or 3 seconds of a play, you're going to be sitting back there being very comfortable. You can extend the play. You can run. You can scramble. With those 2 things mixed in, and then you mix in a guy who's going to have a modern defensive scheme that can kind of confuse us. And I'll make a broader point about what I don't like about Iowa's offensive scheme here. We have an O coordinator, limited experience as he is for most OCs. He's sitting on the sideline with now 10 years of college football experience. We ask our QBs to make so many improvisational calls at the line where they don't have a great view of the game. They're under center. They can't really see how it's all moving. Most OCs call from the box. Almost every single college team, it's not great for player development because you don't teach a QB how to call check with me or how to get out of bad plays. But almost every single college team now goes to look to the sideline. Let's get a new play call in.
Yeah.
And we're asking a 20-year-old kid to process that information and then go against this other savant on the other side.
Right.
Who could trick him?
Yeah.
And we seem to get tricked so often.
Right.
And I think that is if I had to make any critique about what change I want to see,
check with me.
Is a check with me where it's just take it out of the QB's hands. Yeah. Let him think about making the plays. Don't make him. And then we also build in this whole conservative nature about things.
Yeah.
Say if you aren't liking something, get out of it.
Just go opposite outside zone.
Yeah. And I feel like teams have gotten so good at playing passive and tricking us into
mapping our offense.
Yeah.
They go, clearly this is the check when we show this front.
Yeah.
We can anticipate this type of check. We can anticipate this
type
of call.
We get gashed so often.
Right. And we're always taking the approach we want to simplify how we play. It makes sense for defense. You want them playing fast.
Yeah.
Offense doesn't work as well because you can have a predictive type of defensive call.
Yeah.
That can, you can't play fast on offense in a way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
As fast as you can.
You're going in the same spot.
The benefit of your defense gets by playing fast is greater than your offense playing fast. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it needs to be built out to have that check with me component to have a little more thought behind the calls.
You need to act like you're actually playing a brain on the other side of the ball. you can't act like this is just checkers and that we're going to be faster and quicker to a spot. We don't care if they know where we're going. It's such an idiotic idea behind offense football. And it's why we've seen like teams with even exceptional talent on the offense side of the ball, like 2018, still have games where we're just struggling. And I think that's just a larger indictment of Brian Ferentz more than anything. And just kind of the philosophy that goes into Iowa football. If you could match what we have in this passive, play fast defense where we're building really tough kids, and then combine that with a real thoughtful offense where we're actually trying to win games, not just build out like these player development moments. I think you could really see a huge leap. But finally, I think that's why we're going to lose this Nebraska game, because you're going to walk into a Matt Rule as a defensive-minded coach. He's got an exceptional defensive-minded defensive coordinator, and then you're going to be playing a QB you can really push your buttons in a road environment where Nebraska's been playing for a ton.
We've played with much better teams against much worse teams and had a hard time winning here. And I think that's a definitely concern. I would throw this in another one of those games where if we don't lose this one, we might lose this one. I think it's going to be a tough game. I don't anticipate we'll win by more than 4 if we do win. Because it's not a first-year program in Game 12.
And if you're not getting the Scott Frost plays, the fumbled punt, the personal foul,
the details,
the detail plays, and then you're asking someone to just step into a Nebraska away game and beat them. I just don't see that going well.
It seems like,
especially with just a really talented QB. I think their QB is going to be like.
I would push back on that. I know that he has the highlight plays that make you kind of jump out and go, wow, that's a huge arm. That's good legs. That's a good ball. There's a reason why he had a 50% completion percentage in college. There's a reason why he had a high turnover to touchdown percentage. You haven't seen him play a defense in a full game. And I think there's like some hesitation from the program itself and like the writers that like they had to coach that out of him. And for my, generally the offseason for me is to not listen to people that says coach out of you, especially at the QB position. Like Clifford forever was like,
if he could just stop throwing picks,
stop doing dumb shit. Like we'll be good. It's like, no, like that QB's like continuously doing.
There's a path in his brain. There's a pathway that's
decision making is like, it's almost impossible to coach out of an athlete because it's like, it's how your brain works. And like, decision making is made in a split second. It's not made over like read the question and answer it. It's like, how does your brain like truly like make decisions?
How does it process risk? How is it?
Exactly. And so I think if I push back on Sims a little bit, maybe holds the ball, maybe forces the ball, maybe doesn't have a good progression through his reads. Definitely when you look at just the tangibles, that's why he's Elite 11 QB, why he's a 4-star, why he's a 4-star transfer. I would push back that maybe he can turn the ball over 3 or 4 times.
I think that's how we win this game.
Right.
Because I think their defense, as young as it will be, is going to give us a lot of problems.
Right. It's
similar to like in Iowa State. It's just going to be smart. If you're smart against us and you're not just trying to out-tough us, usually doesn't go very well.
Definitely. So I think we both see that. I see that as a win. That's your loss on the schedule.
So 10-2, both
of us 10-2. Both would most likely be West Division title winners. It'd be unlikely if we went 10-2 with a loss to Penn State and only done one West opponent.
And Nebraska too. I think that'd be almost guaranteed we win the West.
Right. So I think it's a super exciting season to prepare for. I mean, just how much is at stake as we brought up, how much turnover there is. There's a lot of question marks, a lot of programs. The QB room is just insane for the West. You think back 2 years ago when it was like, even last year preparing for this, like when you're looking at the teams, how drastically different the QB room is in the West and the coaches are. It's just going to be like massive data point moves every week. You're constantly reevaluating your own team, the West as a whole, the Big Ten and the country, just with the transfer portal, just has so much variability. And then all the coaching changes as well. Just like, it's going to be a wild year in the West.
Truly a toss-up year too. I think what the takeaway though from this, just running through this is we have just an exceptionally talented defense, and we filled in the gaps enough on offense. Especially, I mean, the skill room is just completely remade.
Right.
You have offensive skill now. We haven't had a fully fleshed out offensive skill since 2018. I think this is the most talented offense since 2018 on that skill. And O-line, if Parker can step in at right tackle and be like an honorable mention fringe all Big Ten player, if Feth can step in at right guard and be in that same realm, then you might actually see a team that's capable of winning a Big Ten title. But the defense is going to be top 5 in the country again. And if you're not going to have exceptional offensive talent, every single game will likely come down to Cade McNamara to win it. And I believe that he can get a lot of wins that way.
Yeah, I think when you looked at the schedule originally, how, favorable it was, I think 10-2 is definitely a reasonable prediction in my mind.
Yeah. We'll get to the Big Ten title game a little bit later.
Yeah.
We can pick that game when we get there. But for 12 games.
Yeah. I think, what is your low point? Where do you view, what do you think our floor is?
If we just stay in this predictable mode of offense, where we put the clamps on Cade, we say, okay, we're still going to run first and second.
Yeah,
we're not going to run QB draws. We're not going to run any QB reads with you.
Yeah,
we have an injury to Eric Hall. Caleb Brown isn't a polished receiver. He can't get open.
Yeah,
I think we then quickly fall down to the realm where it's a 7-win team.
Yeah,
we have to operate on hope at this point on offense, but it's difficult to imagine a team that doesn't have some kind of explosiveness to it, especially with Caleb Johnson too. You're going to you just have talent, and we haven't had talent in multiple places on a team.
I would argue that our 8 is our floor, 8 wins, just because we won 7 last year with 7 regular season games, not the bowl game, but the deviation from our offense and how big of a jump that's going to be this year, even if it's just the 80th best offense, it's a massive jump.
80th best offense probably wins 9 games.
Right. Your defense, I do expect the defense to take a slight step back. I think, we're not really taking account of how important Campbell was. I think the last 3 years under Campbell at middle linebacker, 2020, after game 3 until now, we've been a top 10 unit for a reason. Top 5 is because Campbell's a generational prospect.
Yeah.
Not just a draftable player, not just an all Big Ten player. He's generational middle linebacker.
Future Hall of Famer.
And when Iowa loses generational players, it's a dramatic step. Even if the guy's draftable behind him, a good Big Ten player behind him, you cannot fathom what it's like to not have Campbell at middle linebacker and what that looks like every play.
Yeah.
I think that deviation back, even though maybe that's the worst prediction imaginable, is that deviation from linebacker is huge. Just with the other pieces we brought in, with Nick Jackson coming in, I have a hard time thinking we'll be dropped back any worse than 12th on defense.
Yeah.
So I think our floor is still 8 wins in my mind, just with the schedule as well. And I only see truly one auto loss. I think that's Penn State. So I think our floor still, our ceiling is 11 wins. And that's a great spot to be as an Iowa fan. If it did to be 8 wins, I think we mentioned at the start, it'd be cataclysmic.
Yeah.
There'd be some very tough discussions.
I think this is not, I think if Brian gets fired because of his offensive numbers, I think Kirk leaves with him. I don't think Kirk can fire his son in good conscience.
Yeah, because it's kind of his own.
Because it's his own offense. He's put the handcuffs on Brian.
Right.
He's had this whole mentality about how to play offense.
Yeah.
Where it's let's just not make mistakes. Let's get out of here. Let's punt the ball away.
Yeah.
I don't think he can essentially sabotage his son's career and then hang on to his job.
Yeah.
In good conscience. And it brings up a very interesting fact where, if Kirk is to move on after the season and Brian goes with him, I would have hoped to God we retain the rest of the staff.
Yeah.
Maybe do an internal hire like a LeVar Woods. Maybe even Phil Parker moves up to head coach, and then you promote Seth Wallace to defensive coordinator. But the money is going to be on the table. You've seen the contracts being handed out to other West coaches. There's a lot of money floating around the Big Ten right now. And this is going to be a marker for, we'll point to this season for whether Kirk continues and maybe has a great send-off, maybe wins a Big Ten title this year, has a couple more good years of the transfer portal being administered, or it's the end of an era.
Right. Yeah. So obviously stakes are high.
Yeah.
It's a big year for Iowa. Obviously we're talking about Kirk possibly leaving. But this could be the crown jewel in his entire career.
Yeah.
That's where the season sits, and definitely it's been leading up to this for a while. You think of last year's offense and, Iowa's program as a whole. This season is just extremely important for his future.
It is.
And Brian's future. So we both end up with 10-2. That's our season prediction. Next episode, we're actually going to do a mailbag episode. So make sure to comment on this YouTube any questions you have for us regarding the season, as well as your own prediction for this season as well. But that'll kind of drive our next podcast about, answering those responses. And thanks again for all the views and the subscribers. We've really been blown away how much the channel's grown. These first 5 videos, now 6. We just can't get enough of that support. So thank you very much.
Yeah, make sure to subscribe. I think we're only at like 250 subscribers at the moment, but we're getting a lot more views than that. So if you're continuously viewing these videos, just make sure to subscribe. It helps us out a lot for getting monetized and other things like that. So really appreciate all the help, though. It's been a great time.
Thank you. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.